our standards for sure. Maybe not by government standards, but by ours. And so we want to be going on this. And I noticed there were 7 committees on the schedule today, and 6 of them aren't meeting. So at least the Finance Committee's getting out ahead of everybody else. I know some of them had to cancel because of another meeting, but I'm still going to rub it into them, whether they did or not. I would ask Senator Hickman if you would, who is our new secretary of the committee, if you would do the invocation for us. All right, just so you'll know the staff, I think many of you know Diego. He's been here a long time. Diego Santana, administrative assistant. Tucker, if you'd, where'd Tucker go? Did he have to go get something? I'll introduce him in a minute then. And then Sam White is with communications over here. And y'all want to introduce yourself? This is some of the Senate research right here.
My name is Austin Bryson. I'm with the Senate Research Office, and I'll be the policy analyst for the Finance Committee.
Even though you're more on this guy in public safety,
yeah,
go ahead.
I'm Carla. I'm just here for the first meeting. I'm public safety.
She's got his back in public safety, even everywhere. And then Blake Travis, that has been here a long time working on this committee. Used to be from Senate Research side. We had Ryan Bowersox back there, and he and Blake and my oldest daughter were all at Wake Forest at one time. But now he's gone to the dark side over there, I guess, working for them, as has our former Ways and Means Chairman, Brett Harrell. He's at our meeting today. But we're glad to have all of you here. We need to approve the rules. If y'all want to look those over for just a minute, they're the same rules we had last year, the year before. All right. I'll give everybody just a second to look them over and see. And with that, if there's no questions, we've got a motion from Vice Chair Albers to approve the rules of the minute. Is there a second for the committee? We've got a second. I think we can just do a voice vote on this. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? None opposed. Okay, for those of you that are new to this committee, and there's, I think, 8 new members here. Big turnover there. I look back in 2001, there were only 6 members of this committee. Now there's 15, over a fourth of the Senate. So seems to be a growing interest in this committee. But the new members, well, I guess maybe I shouldn't call the ones that were able to find it. But we've got our Appropriations Chairman, Senator Blake Tillery, here. Our caucus chairman on the Republican Party, Senator Jason Avatarte, Senator Brandon Beach, one of our new freshman senators, Senator Shelley Eccles, and Senator Mike Hodges, another freshman here. And this committee, just so you'll know, our overall broad goal here is the Committee on Finance is over the state's taxing authority and revenue collections. And we also deal with the financial securities industry, including the financial services industry, including securities and housing industry in that. So that's our goal. A better way would be that we are responsible for the revenue that's brought into the state. Chairman Tiller over there is responsible for spending it. But as you'll see in some documents here, he in many cases with billions of dollars would say that the buck doesn't stop here. The buck never got here. It was pulled off before it ever got to him through different things. So it's taken out of the mix before it gets to him. But this is not for any action today in particular, but just to make sure if you're new and didn't know this, there was a bill several years ago that came about from a study committee that was chaired by Senator Albers, and I was a member of it. And we looked at all the tax credits and how we compared also to other states. And some of them here, like Pew Charitable Trust, said, well, there's three groups of states. There's those that do a really good job, those that do a fair job, and those that do a poor job. Unfortunately, we were in the poor job category. And so we tried to make some changes, and one of that was Senate Bill 6, which he sponsored, which says that the House Ways and Means Chairman and the Finance Chairman of the Senate, House Ways and Means, of course, being in the House, would pick 5 that they would study each year, and the Department of Audits would have those done, in many cases by sending them to other groups to do them in an independent manner. That one of the criticisms from the groups is that the only studies we had were done by the industry in many cases and weren't really an independent study per se. So we've got 9 of the 10 here that were done. I think we're still awaiting one of them from last year, but we can. I put this is sort of a recap on the front page, and then it's in different form. The first one's a little bit different than some of them, but you'll see data about these, and I think there's like a couple hundred of these out there. So the 5 picked, I think, by House Ways and Means were more looking at the biggest dollars and sort of going down on it. And so you'll see half of these coming from the chairman over there as well. But we can go through these a little bit. You know, I think we're looking at setting up a committee to go through these probably more thoroughly come May, according to the bill that we passed last year. Doesn't mean that some of them wouldn't be looked at now. So the first one there, the low income housing tax credit, if you really look at the last 2 lines, that's how much the state will spend on it. And this one's a little bit different than some of the others because this is over the life of it. So you've got different ones every year being added. After so many years, it's taken off, so it's sort of a blend, but that's over the life of them. So any action on these would mean, you know, they don't go away immediately per se. The revenue generated is in the column on the right, though the audit report, if you look at the summary page on the next page, would say that it wasn't necessarily because of this that revenue was generated. That in most cases they thought it would be generated more than that. The manufacturing sales tax exemption is one done by the House, and this one is done. Looked at the sales tax exemption that was put in years ago. Again, the revenue is not necessarily generated because of it, but again, this one sort of comes under a policy decision too. So we would have to look at that. You want to do a couple of them, or you in a spot to,
Well, yeah, sure.
so you don't keep hearing just my voice here, you know? Yeah, there we go.
You know, as we continue to look down each one of these, you know, the purpose of measuring them was to take the emotion out of it, right? Because each elected representative and senator is concerned about their own districts. And they're concerned about the jobs in those districts, the families that are supported by different areas. And overall, I think we want to state clearly that, you know, Georgia's the #1 place to do business, and that's important. And by some of the work that has been done in recent years and many years ago, that helped get us to where we are. And then certainly there are a lot of people in the building who are representing those companies and those industries who we greatly respect as well. And we understand why they will be constantly working toward having favorable tax code in order to support their businesses. But to take all the emotion out of that, I love math, because there's no emotion in math. We get to look at it and say, as good stewards of the taxpayers' dollars and good fiduciaries, we can look at what makes sense and what doesn't make sense. So I'll work it up from the bottom up, and we'll meet in the middle. You know, one that's hard to quantify as an example is the grocery sales tax exemption, right? Which we've had tax on groceries in the past, and we've not had tax on groceries in the past. We've actually done some analysis in the past on that one specifically that showed it's a de minimis change to the individual or family that's buying groceries, but the total sum is extraordinary. And if you look at that one alone, $691 million with revenue generated at 27.9 million. Well, it's not a one-for-one correlation, as you're going to see on some other ones, but you'll see that that one specifically is a little bit unique. Whereas if you were to go up to the R&D tax credit, as an example, I'm just going to skip around here for a minute, you'll see that that one we spent $234 million on. We get 3.9 back. Now, I don't know about you all, but who else would make an investment with that kind of return? It just doesn't work. And if you look at the full analysis, which I'm sure many in this room already have, whether it be the one-page summary that came with these, or look at the entire detailed report, you'll see that the ends did not justify what the means had put forward on those. So that's a couple, and you want to go back and take a couple more, or you want me to keep going?
Sure, you can, we'll do another one if you
All
want
right.
to. and then
The next one would be the historic rehab tax credit. And this was focused on the home area specifically as well, because it's one area that we had not measured well in the past. While we're excited about reviving historic areas, and whether that be through a downtown or a specific location, we spent $32 million to get back 10. Not a very good return on investment as well. And the last one I'll mention here is prescription drug sales tax credit. That's $938 million. So nipping on the $1 billion mark with $46 million in return. Again, a little different because there's more of a human factor there with what that is, but these numbers are significant. And just to give you an example, the state expenditures just on these 9 tax credits is just less than $6 billion. And if you think about some of the conversations we've been having about lowering the income tax rate, making up for what will be future budgets when the economy continues to slow, and I know Chairman Tillery knows we're not going to get big capital gains, windfall taxes, and things of that nature. That's an awful lot of money.
All right, and you know, part of this discussion is because of some audits that we had in the past. The film tax audit in 2020 said of the 31 states that do a film tax credit, we had the highest amount. I know larger states, New York and California, I believe are both under $500 million, and I think we're looking at about $1.4 billion this year in credits that are available. But the other part of it, it said, and we have, again, had legislation since then that now require audits of these, but at the time it said of the 31 states that give out credits, we have less controls than anybody. Only 3 states didn't require audits at the time. 28 states, they required them to be audited. 3 states didn't have audits, and it was, we give out the most money, but it's all self-reported. There's no controls on it, and unfortunately, even some of them that didn't turn in the minimum amount of paperwork that was requested still got the credit. So we're trying to get more business-like in these things, and this is one of the things that we're doing, is to try to see from a scientific, a data-driven point, where's the best bang for our buck. And then some of these things are simply a policy decision. You know, we've got Florida and Tennessee that both don't have an income tax rate per se. Tennessee's got a little bit different tax that I won't go into, but that does bring in some revenue. But they also have the high sales tax rate, I believe, in the country. And if you look at Florida, they actually collect more per capita per person than we do, just in different ways. So some of that's just a policy decision of which way do you want to go, or is there a blend of them? And so all of this is part of trying to be, have an overall look at our tax revenue structure and see what's the best bang for the buck, what's fairest to the people in Georgia on all of this. And so we'll continue working this area. I'll let Senator Rhett interrupt me just a minute here. He wanted to ask a question. No, go ahead. Hit your button again. I think you cut it off.
I was
just gonna ask if there's a possibility of perhaps making some sort of adjustments to some of these so that they might produce a better revenue or?
Right. You know, that's all part of the discussion. Nothing says that you have to, it's all or nothing. It could be, can they be structured in a way that would be better off for everybody? And in many cases, I think that's what will be looked at.
And I know I don't expect you to answer that right now, that's just,
Mhm.
just me thinking out loud.
All right, and I think Senator Beach is up.
Mr. Chairman, I'm new to the committee, but, and look forward to serving on this committee with you. On the film tax credit, for example, on the economic impact, is that just from what happens on the film studio site? Or do we take into account restaurants and catering and different things that happen off-site, for example? I can tell you, I know those folks eat out a lot that are working on movies, because a lot of them are here on a temporary deal, so they're not cooking at home. They're eating out at our restaurants and staying at our hotels. Does that take into impact hotels and restaurants and retail spending, or is it just on what happens on the movie set?
Well, they've looked at both, and the counter to that is that in many cases, there were things put in there that didn't even happen in Georgia. Expenses paid to people outside of Georgia. I know in one case, it was a $66,000 set produced in New York. We gave a credit not only for it being produced, which did nothing for Georgia, but for flying it down here and flying it back. You know, there's just things that need to be looked at overall to tighten that up. Senator Hickman? Well, the economic output is what the spinoff would be when you see that number. You know, on one of them here, if you see the labor income, that's the labor that came about because of it, but that labor might have more economic output. So you see the economic output being a much larger number. Jobs and you know, the in-between would be the overall value added to the state. And then there's other things that look at and say, if you did this money another way, would it have created more revenue? And in some cases, it would have by not using that money there, but using it elsewhere under other uses. So that's why for a CPA like you, I know the full reports go into all that, and you've been getting those, haven't you, or not? Okay, so I know not everybody's going to read the entire report, but I did want people to be able to at least have the summaries here, which generally are one page to look at. So it's, again, as I said at the beginning, we're not here to solve all these issues, but just to bring them up and say this is something we need to continue to look at after we got such a poor rating a few years ago on the controls we had on them. And, you know, in many cases, we're giving away, not outside the film industry, people can get $20 million in tax credits and then self-report everything to the state of Georgia. There's no audit, there's no checking up on them to see if they did what they say they're doing. And so that's where we certainly get criticized, and rightly so, because we shouldn't be having taxpayer money going to places like that and not having any accountability from them, and that's what we've got to work on. Senator Albers?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think one, you know, specifically to look at would be the third one down. Last year, General Assembly did vote through the computer equipment sales tax exemption. State expenditure $66 million on that. We get 2.5 back. Right. This is equipment people are going to buy anyway, and it's just not a good use of our money. Right. It sounds good in theory, but they're going to buy the equipment. They need it. It's a part of doing business. You know, one thing to say though that's important. There are some that we've measured in the past that are good. In fact, they're so good you could argue we should expand them. If you're losing money on investment, are you going to continue to do that investment? The answer is no. But if you're getting a 3 or 4 to 1 return on that money, you might say, I want to invest more. And that's the purpose of doing these measurements. But know this, for every one of these that we measure that the state loses money, that means every other industry, business, and family is paying for that credit. So that person or that sector or that company that won means the other companies and other individuals are paying for it. And that's just not right. And as government, we hope not to pick winners and losers.
All right, our caucus chair, Senator Albert Harte.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I did want to follow with Senator Beach's question, and we can talk about it after the meeting offline, but what are the specific definitions of value added and economic output for this exercise?
Yeah, and I don't want to get in the weeds too much, but we can probably go through that and put the definitions down on all of these because
Okay.
they're pretty standard on what's out there, when these are evaluated. But I can certainly get those down specifically. Senator Cowsert.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I had a question really for Vice Chairman. Was going over that computer equipment sales tax exemption. The summary tells us that there were only 21 to 24 companies that utilized that, and that they grew from 1.1 billion in purchases to 1.7. So those are tax-free, sales tax-free purchases now. Is there any way we can know who those companies are that had good enough lobbyists to get it, or is that confidential information from tax returns? I'm just curious if we know who we gave this to.
And I was just going, in general, they're confidential information, and that's one of the things that has been noted is that many states, California, New York, and others, you can see who got it in Georgia. It's protected with confidentiality, and that might be a policy decision to look at as well as, the trade-off between if you're getting public money, should you have to say so versus protecting you against other businesses that might could use it against you to, be better competitors.
And if I could answer that, I think that we do have a reason sometimes when we're trying to woo a large economic development project to keep things confidential, right? Especially if we are competing against other states or other metro regions to do that. In this case, though, that does not apply, right? This is an ongoing incentive for someone, and I agree with what you're asking, Senator Cowsert. And we know many of those companies. We could probably rattle them all off, but we'll protect the guilty right now and not talk about that. But we do need to understand what that is to be fair. And look, some people did great jobs, and if I worked for those companies, I'd be asking for them too. There's no fault to the individuals and companies who are asking for a tax credit. We just have to make sure it makes sense.
All right, Senator Tillery.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to make sure that I'm reading it right. So I'm like Senator Cowsert, just making sure that there's not a typo and that I understand it correctly. Is it saying, particularly on that computer equipment one, so if I go out and buy a computer, there's no sales tax exemption, I have to buy more than 15 million before I would qualify for that exemption?
Correct. And
Okay.
most of that equipment is bought out of state, so you can't really say that it's going to have an economic output in Georgia because it's really going to a company that doesn't produce in Georgia as well.
Okay.
It's written, that law is written rather confusing, but you're going to pay a certain tax. It's probably more generous than the first time you read that particular law and what the credit is. Well, again, this is going to be a discussion for this session and probably this whole year, but I did want the people on the committee to start getting familiar with these studies. I mean, we're doing them for a reason. And I will say that for those of you that are new, we're going to get an onslaught of bills from the House coming over before crossover day that you'll be dealing with. And I will say that the former Ways and Means Chair, Brett Harrell, sitting out here, gave me the lowest amount that had ever come over in the history from House Ways and Means. He actually did some hard work over there and cutting them down as well. So I appreciate that. It's gone up a little bit since then, so, or a lot. All right, we can discuss this some more, but again, I just wanted to take the first meeting to set up the rules and get people familiar with this, one of many issues we'll deal with. And, we'll get, more information out as it becomes available. I didn't wanna, burden you with too much paperwork, but the details are certainly there in all these reports. And as a matter of fact, the fiscal audit office up there is an independent group. They put out over 300 audits last year. Many of them are on school systems, but there's a lot of information there that sometimes people don't see that are really good recommendations to the state of Georgia, and might be good to look at them sometime as a member of the Finance Committee to see all the things they're recommending that be done here. All right, any other business anybody wants to bring forward? And I will say too that I think the last at least several years or more, we've only had 2 meetings go over an hour. So we try to keep these meetings, work on them ahead of time, respect your time. Past performance is no guarantee of future performance, is that how they say it? But we try to do that. And with that, I appreciate everyone being here, and this meeting's adjourned.